Mopeds. When I was a little kid, one of my dream Christmas toys was a logging truck. Not this one, more like this one. Oh, but I strongly believe that boys never grow up. Their toys just become bigger, more complex, and more expensive. So now, sometimes in the evenings, I'm jamming to SnowRunner on PS5 and watching logging truck content on YouTube. I actually done a few things beforehand and off camera. This was me experiencing pure childhood joy over the holidays and playing with my big toy. But also, if we want to start this video properly, we need to discuss how we can turn those digital STL files into a real work of craftsmanship. First of all, we need a model. Here it is, on the Aladdin Model website. And I'll tell you more about how they made it for me later in the video. We also need a 3D printing setup. Elegoo Saturn 4 Ultra 16K and their big ass... and their big wash and cure station. Affiliate links down below. My resin of choice is 3D Jake 8K high detail in a silver gray color. And my settings are 2 micron layer height, 1.1 exposure based on a calibration test from Table Flip Foundry. This is actually a very useful model and you'll find all the explanation on their website, and the amount of burn-in layers is determined by the thickness of the raft, which on all Aladdin files is 0.3 mm. So let's say that we have successfully printed all of our pieces. First of all, peeling them off the build plate is easy. I like to start with a curved hobby blade and lift one corner, and then wiggle a metal spatula underneath until the print falls off. I clean them in 2 stages. The first, dirty stage, is where I dunk the print in a tub of alcohol and watch how all the excess resin gets dissolved. Then, when it's as clean as it can get here, I throw it into a vat of clean alcohol. The machine creates a strong whirlpool and removes any sticky remnants of the uncured resin. While it's doing its job, I clean my workspace and tools, get rid of all the dirty towels, and when the job is done, or almost done, I remove the supports. With delicate and fragile parts, I find it safer to carefully sever the connection with a sharp hobby blade, but for all of the rest, just yanking the print away from the supports is good enough. It takes a while to get used to it because it's such a brutal approach, but trust me that it works fine and there's pretty much no harm done to the print itself. If there's still some alcohol residue, I evaporate it with a hairdryer set to the lowest setting, and when the prints are completely dry, I throw them in the curing station. This machine won't turn on unless the protective lid is in place, and it blasts the prints with high-intensity UV light. I like to bake them for roughly 4 or 5 minutes from each side. Okay, now that we have all the parts cured, we need to do some extra sanding, filling, and cleaning. Sure, everyone in their right mind will put supports in hidden places where the pits will be out of sight, but with complex parts such as these, you often have no other option. It should also come as no surprise that some parts will have visible layer lines because, again, you have to make compromises somewhere. Our tools of choice for this stage will be sanding sticks and sponges, a sharp hobby blade and a chisel, and lastly, a vat of water for wet sanding. The last piece is extremely important because, as we know, resin dust is so toxic. In fact, any dust is harmful to your lungs, but this one is especially bad, so wet sanding protects you. It also makes your workspace clean as a positive side effect, but the advantages go beyond that. I found that the sanded surfaces are much smoother, and the process also keeps your tools in good condition. Some parts are actually easier to remove and attach later, or replace. Also, one of the downsides of 3D printing are these slight deformations that are sometimes inevitable. Unless, of course, you want to create a solid block of resin from extremely dense supports. But hey, in many cases it's so minuscule that a bit of mandatory sanding will straighten the part. But when things get serious, we can actually put leftover resin to good use. Just build up the volume, hit it with a UV lamp or flashlight, and continue until you have added enough material. Cure, sand, repeat, and you'll quickly get there. The best thing is that you're using the same material, so when it comes to sanding, you'll get consistent results. I had it almost perfectly straight, but when I dry fitted the cap, the fit was excellent, so I didn't push it any further. Another great example of this technique is this tight, awkward area where the headlights should go. Have you ever held a piece of sponge with a pair of tweezers in such a weird spot and achieved excellent results? Me neither, until now. This is where the kit's headlights should go, but you see, these are modern LEDs and I don't have clear resin, so I decided to design and print my own retro-style headlights, which will be easier to work with. And you'll see more similar details as we progress with the build. Another downside of 3D printing is this slight but noticeable warping of parts that are large but flat. One of the best fixes is heating them up with a hairdryer set to the strongest heat and then trying to bend it back. It didn't quite work in this case, but I was able to glue it to the truck's frame while the resin was still soft and flexible. These are all the nuances of this technology I encountered here, so let's now focus on finishing the individual parts of the truck. The main log carrier was another culprit, so I gave it the hairdryer treatment. I also removed most of the fine details because, well, it's my dream model, so of course I was gonna go the extra mile with pretty much everything. But also, and this is undisputable, handles and any other round parts are always nicer and sturdier when you make them from copper wires. I'll end up replacing these caps in a moment. The log carrier forks are functional, but I found it easier to superglue the securing pin in place and then make the ends from scratch. The locking mechanism for the steel rope is on point, and the kit actually comes with 3D printed cables. But if you have spare, unused metal ropes from armor kits, this is the best place to use them. They'll be much more realistic, flexible, and most importantly, sturdier. See, it all works like the real thing. At this point, I designed and printed more additional parts that I closely observed in reference pictures. I also enlarged the roller blades and created new axles for them, all super accurate. One of the best details on this truck are the chains welded to the forks. These chains are from Trumpeter or Master Tools, and they're the finest I could find. I also used some plastic profiles and added more specific details which are not present on every truck. These are more niche modifications, but I wanted to add as many details as I could. Let's now see how to work with photo etch and copper sheets. I bought 3 different sets of textured plate from Aber, and again, it's one of those accessories that are good to have because you never know when you'll need them. Brass is quite sturdy, and it's much harder to cut and bend compared to, let's say, copper or aluminum, so make sure to pack extra patience in your lunchbox. Also, it should be quite obvious by now, black extra thin superglue and debonder from VMS were the most used adhesives on this project. I spent like 1 full bottle of CA and 2 bottles of debonder, links down in the description. But yeah, copper is extremely versatile because of its softness and flexibility, and you'll see it more as we move along. Now it's time to complete the engine, and this is gonna be huge. First of all, Detroit Diesel 12V71 is a monster of an engine, but again, I made some additional details here. Several types of sockets, connectors, pipes and valves that I used across the entire model, but these are not obligatory. The model is gonna look great the way it is, but if you want to add every visible hose and cable, then you'll definitely need those. I remember when I was younger and I was trying to add hoses to some SPG model, and how I knew that the details don't look quite right because the sockets are missing. Also, despite its size, it sits really low in the frame, so most of it will remain out of sight. Now we'll need some thick rubber tubing. You can source this material from old cables, and the way to strip them properly is to make a shallow incision with the blade and then carefully pull on the rubber tube. If you have old radios or other electric junk, make sure to salvage some wires from them because again, you never know when you'll need them. Suddenly, those wires sticking out of the engine make sense, right? But this leads us to the most important material I used on this model: lead or pewter foil. This metal sheet is extremely soft, easy to cut, bend, sand, and you can shape it any way you want. It's just amazing. You can even cut and sand it into these super fine strips, and here I'm using those to make metal cable ties, with a piece of wire acting as the tightening screw. And as always, super glue and debonder make the part stronger, but the glue also acts as filler around the edges. The main problem here is that most of the cables and hoses go from the engine into the cab, but at the same time I need the cab to be removable for painting. So I made a fake wall from styrene. It won't be noticeable on the assembled model, but it'll allow me to add every cable in the engine compartment. While doing so, I noticed an air compressor for the brake system, so I quickly made a simplified replica, and this is also a part of the model if you buy it. So with the wall and the engine glued in place, we can start adding all of the plumbing. First are those oil pipes which I detailed with lead foil, and this big garden hose which is visible in reference images and sticks out of the engine compartment. And next are these slightly thinner hoses, and here I'll use this 0.6mm fishing tube. I don't know what they're originally used for, but they're hollow and flexible. All of the cables and smaller hoses are made from lead wires. I have them in all sizes ranging from 0.3 to 1mm, and even though they're not as shiny as copper wires, they're much better for this type of job because of how soft they are. You can shape them with tweezers, toothpicks, your hands, or they just sag down under their own weight sometimes. I had several reference images for this area, but I think it's understandable that you can't replicate every wire precisely. I knew this even before I started building the model, and my philosophy was that if I saw a wire, but I didn't know where it originated, nor where it led to, I would simply make it go from somewhere to somewhere else, nothing specific. And if I could see where it starts or ends, I tried to replicate that as best as I could. Needless to say, it became a chore after a while because the wall turned into a literal jungle of wires, and it was becoming hard to navigate. But I enjoyed every bit of this process, and even though I'm not sure how I'm gonna paint such a complex area, I'm extremely proud of the result. But we're not done yet. The thick air hoses are made from several components, and they have all kinds of clamps and whatnot. Ladies and gentlemen, pewter foil for the rescue. It can be cut just as easily as paper, and it's so easy to work with. Seriously, it's probably the best material for detailing. Every single clamp was made from it, but I also used it to make those bent sections which are made from plastic and have reinforcing ribs on the surface. This required a lot of patience, sure, but the process was really straightforward, and it's much easier to work with metal strips than plastic ones which don't like to stay bent and tend to bounce back. So with these out of the way, the engine compartment is finished, and the thick tubes will remain removable for easier painting. Sometimes I like to use copper foil in a cheating way of sorts, because on this battery case, I'm not building a hollow box with a functional lid. It's just a solid cube with some copper sheet glued on top of it to resemble a lid. I know it's not cheating, it's a detail like any other. I just wanted to show that we don't always have to fully commit to realism, and the result is still gonna look just as good. Okay, another big part of the truck is the cab protector. Here we find ourselves in a tricky situation because the area behind these ladders is totally messed up. But luckily, I made spare parts for my and your pleasure as well if you decide to give this model a try. So now I can snap them off and gain access to these hidden areas and give the entire cab protector, which also serves as a huge water reservoir for the brake cooling system, the good old sand over. I was also going to replace this platform with photo etch, so I traced its shape on a piece of plastic and made a template out of it. Removing such a chunky piece of resin wasn't an easy job. I foolishly thought I could just cut it away with a rotary tool while keeping everything wet, because otherwise my whole studio would be shrouded in toxic dust, but this wasn't much better. Luckily, scraping the remnants away with a sharp blade is much cleaner. So the destructive part is finally over, and we can start adding stuff. After I marked out their position and proper spacing, I glued the spare ladders back in place. I also made these back-facing LED lights according to reference images, and again, they're included in the model as alternative/detail parts. They even have an entry point for the electric cable. I also contributed to the model itself by texturing these planks in Blender using alpha brushes. So let's now talk about how the model was even made while I'm detailing these exhausts. Aladdin Model kept asking me for years if I'd be interested in some sort of collaboration. They would make any model I choose, and I would build it on my channel. Easy as that. But I couldn't think about anything that would be original or interesting enough for such a project, until I started playing SnowRunner and fell in love with the Pacific P16, and suddenly we had our dream project. Gopal, the 3D engineer who created the entire model, did a wonderful job and spent countless hours on it. I still don't understand how he could make it from only one low-quality official site profile from a Pacific brochure and some sketchy images from the front and back. All of the reference material was collected and provided by me, mostly as screenshots from YouTube videos, which you can watch on the Road Rail Marine channel. The only time we used the in-game model as reference was the underside. I flipped the truck over, which is easy enough, and took screenshots of the axles and transmission. I also kept a watchful eye over the project and corrected any mistakes or pointed out missing parts if I saw them. In a way, we became experts of sorts on this truck over the months. For example, me and my future wife spent one evening Sherlock Holmesing the internet and looking for the manufacturer and dimensions of the tires, just so we could include accurate lettering on the tire sidewalls. The model was finished a few days before Christmas, so it was very poetic that when I was a kid, I found my toy logging truck under the tree, and now, 30 years later, I received my beloved Pacific P16 as a Christmas gift. Anyway, getting back on track, now I used the plastic template to cut out a new platform out of the Aber engrave plate. It's more detailed now and looks more in scale. Another excellent example is using the 3D printed mud flaps as a guide and cutting them from pewter foil. Why didn't I use thin plastic for them, you might ask? Well, because in real life they get bent and battered over time, and it's easier to replicate the effect with pewter. You know what we didn't talk about yet? Wheels. And the P16 has lots of them, and they're big. Removing the supports from the tread pattern is not fun, but inevitable. However, I sanded them pretty heavily so I could imitate some wear on the rubber, and to enhance this worn-out effect, I also distressed them with a metal wire brush. I already noticed on the truck that although they fit perfectly, they don't want to stay in place. So instead of using blue tack like I did there, I opted for extended axles on the trailer. I added 1mm thick lengths of copper wire, and although it's not perfect, at least it'll hold them in place for the time being. The fit on these parts was really tight, because again, 3D printing isn't perfect and you have to make compromises somewhere. And if you print cylindrical objects at an angle, they'll get slightly deformed and suddenly your perfect circle isn't so perfect anymore. I'm not sure if the trailer body is a single casting, probably not, but adding steel texture to it felt more than appropriate. Here you can also see that superglue can be used to fix crooked shapes. Putting these large functional pieces together is one of the most satisfying feelings ever, because all of a sudden, the pile of resin is turned into a model. But you know what? Even here we can make a few improvements. Reaching into my pile of sockets and T-junctions, I prepped the trailer for the obligatory cable work. I also made guides for the cooling hoses entering the brake drums. The sockets can be shortened depending on our needs. such as here on this junction box that's visible in references. At this point, we need the towing rod as well, and although the fit is pretty tight, it's just enough to slide through the trailer body and stay secured in place without any glue. All of the cables run through the towing rod and come out of the holes that are already replicated in the kit. In fact, these are included in the print files, but I think it's more than sensible to rework them from lead wires. The same material can be used to imitate the tape that's holding them together, and even though one might say that strips of Tamiya masking tape would be better, I'll beg to differ. Thin strips of the lead foil can be used for zip ties as well, which in my opinion are the ultimate details on such a model. The log carrier was assembled and detailed in the same way as before, and I'll keep it removable for painting, even though I'll have to squeeze it under this lifting rope. Let's now tackle the most intimidating part of the build, the cabin. Every part of it is made from two sections, the outer shell and the interior. With doors, the parts have to be perfectly aligned, and the gap between the metal outside and the padded interior can be covered up with strips of lead, as a sort of insulation or something. This foil is really soft, and if you want to, you can sand it away completely. I added the same strips around the door openings because that's what's visible in references, and the doors are actually swinging on simple functional hinges. The cabin has lots of rivets, and while most of them are replicated on the model, I found it easier to remove them when I was sanding and smoothing the surface. Seats are very detailed, but they're missing some of the seams and other sewing details, so I quickly added those with a razor saw and Tamiya scriber. Seat cushions are bound to wear out over time, so these could very well be more recent replacements. I also modeled some additional parts here, such as the hand cranks for the windows, this large gizmo that probably serves as a heater or air conditioner, and one of the best yet least visible details, a Kenwood radio with a handheld transceiver. These are crucial because truckers can let each other know who's coming down the mountain with 150 tons of wood. Detailed views of the interior are few and far between, so replicating it as closely as possible was a team effort, and there's also a lot of variation in the materials. But what all trucks have are rubber mats on the floor. At first I considered printing it, but then decided to employ some good old scratch building. With the aid of a template glued from several pieces of paper, I cut out the exact shape and superglued it to the floor. The cab interior could be made to look much busier, but then again, it's one of those parts that will remain mostly out of sight, so I decided that this amount of detail is more than enough. This is how the inside clicks together, like a jigsaw, and then the outer shell slides right over it. There were a few unsightly gaps here because of the resin getting warped, but I used more lead strips to make everything nice and tidy. Also, the windshields are designed really cleverly, but you'll have to wait and see those in the next video. For now, the cab will remain removable, and the only other detail I added was this unicorn-style antenna from brass tubing and 0.2mm wire. The build is almost finished now, so I took my time and added all those random details I missed along the way. Leftover photo edge from old projects was very handy here, and when it wasn't sufficient, I simply scratch built some parts from copper. Check out the Starlink panel, which I noticed in one video. Once the engine is painted, I'll fix the hood in place with straps made from lead foil. Straightening the bent mirror poles wouldn't be too difficult, but since I was almost done with the model, I figured some extra scratch building wouldn't hurt. After all, cutting a couple of lengths of plastic rod, some L profiles, and a bunch of styrene strips isn't so hard, right? One thing I haven't done in a while is soldering, right? Well, I haven't found any good use for it here, and if the superglue and debonder work together so well, then why change the workflow? I actually bought a sheet of mirror foil for these. I found it on AliExpress, so we'll see in the next video how well it works. Here's another detail I created. These beacons are most likely turning signals. Again, I included a socket for the electric wire at the bottom. 0.3mm LED wire will fit inside like a glove. And check out that there's another wire entering the large mirror. As it turns out, these have built-in heating system so they don't get frosted over in the winter. I just hope these fragile Christmas trees don't get broken off during the painting process. The entry ladders in the kit are okay. Slightly bulkier than they should be, but that's a compromise. You either have a sturdy part, or you'll end up with an extremely fragile 3D print that snaps the moment you look at it sideways. I simply made new ones from copper and photo etch. This was one of those parts I wasn't looking forward to, so I postponed it until the very end. And here's a small technique brought over from modern armor models. For the longest time, I wondered why some horizontal parts of the truck are painted black, and I suspected it was because these had anti-slip surface applied to them. So when the model was pretty much done, I said, yeah, let's do that. The sand is made with VMS Holtex, and even though they have a dedicated glue for it, I actually used this system on my modern Puma, here I used Mr. Surfacer 500 as the adhesive. Simply because I wanted to apply the same primer on top of the anti-slip coating anyway, so this way I used the same concoction as an adhesive and as filler. You see, letting it get absorbed by the gravel makes the surface slightly smoother and more unified. This will be interesting to paint, for sure. And the final part is a fire extinguisher, designed by yours truly. I added a small hole to it. Here you'll add a short piece of 0.2mm copper wire acting as a pin, and then add the 0.6mm hollow tubing. Or if you don't have any of that, just a piece of thick wire will do just fine. And with that, my mission was over. Or not quite. Check out how huge the model is in the unpacked configuration. Over half a meter long, so I took this opportunity and loaded it with logs from my backyard. I won't display the model like this again, but I did an exclusive photo shoot for my Patreon members. So anyway, my friends, I guess childhood dreams really do come true. Let me be honest, when Mr. Aladdin Model said that they'll make this model for me, I couldn't sleep from excitement. And each time Gopal sent me an update, I jumped from my chair and went to check it out. Although then I spent an hour or so pointing out differences and being all like, well, actually, but I mean, holy smokes, the finished model is incredible and I can't even imagine how many hours went into its creation. So, in a way, this video is sponsored by Aladdin Model, even though they didn't pay me to make it, but they made the model for me, and without that, this video wouldn't exist. So I highly encourage you to check out their website and pick a model, or even vote for what model you would like them to make, because that's the founding principle of the company. I have rediscovered my love for logging trucks with SnowRunner and this model, so if you like these machines as well, let me know because I have several ideas for more trucks in the future. Now I'll break the model down and start painting it in the official Pacific colorway, so be on the lookout for the next video. In the meantime, thank you all for your support because without you, I wouldn't be here making these YouTube videos as my daily job, and I wouldn't get this opportunity to make my childhood dream come true either. It truly means the world to me. And special thanks goes to my patrons. Their help allows me to buy excessive amounts of superglue and debonder, and if you're one of them, thank you so much, because if it weren't for you, I wouldn't have this job, and it's truly a privilege. You'll get a lot of cool stuff if you join. I post regular updates, share work in progress photos, various thoughts and observations from the workbench, and we keep in touch through DMs, comments, and emails. Top tier patrons get early access to all of my videos, completely ad-free, and they stay there forever, so if you like listening to them while you're modeling, now you know where to go. There are also bonus extras like 3D printable parts for your own projects, reference photos from real-life locations, and higher-res studio shots of my models that show way more detail than video ever could, and in this case, exclusive shots of the truck loaded with logs as a bonus. Your financial support is appreciated, but never expected. I never thought I would make a proper super detailed model on YouTube because as a content creator you have to balance quality and quantity, but with this one I gave it my all and didn't cut a single corner, so I hope you like the result so far. And remember, build your models, don't just hoard them. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers!